What is the future for Dennis Allen in New Orleans? Can the Saints snap their 5-game losing streak this weekend against the Chargers? And Alvin Kamara's contract, what does it mean for the Saints going forward? We'll talk about all that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Fickner, injury lawyers who've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott Fickner handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. There's a lot going on with our Saints. Usually it's been just negative the last couple of weeks, maybe month, with the 5-game losing streak, with the injuries. And we did get some good news this week regarding Alvin's extension, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But before we get into Alvin, before we get into, for the first time in a long time, a really, really promising injury report, because the Saints finally have players coming back as opposed to players hitting the injury report and hitting IR and being out for multiple weeks. We'll finally see some of those big names back in the lineup. I want to talk about Dennis Allen, because obviously Dennis Allen's been such a polarizing topic pretty much his entire Saints tenure, right? I think we all kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt coming into the 2022 season as the head coach of the Saints, thought maybe a fresh start, see what he can do. And ever since, it's just been pretty much meh. Not egregiously bad, but nothing to really hang your hat on. And this year after the 2-0 start felt like maybe you can do something. And then injuries play a factor, bad coaching plays a factor, boneheaded mistakes, the defense declining, the offense playing poor, the offensive line imploding, so many things. And now you're 2-5. And while it is possible that the Saints can turn things around, I mean, there's still 10 games left in the season. And considering how unpredictable this league is and how weird this season already has been through just a month and a half, I think it'd be foolish to say that they're completely done. That said, we are through 7 games. The Saints are 2-5, have shown zero signs of improvement over the last 5 weeks. If anything, it's just down after down after down. And I don't think there's any pressure on Dennis Allen at the moment. And I know maybe it's unfair for me, someone who has said that he should be fired for the last 2 years, to keep saying this. But at some point, I think the Saints need to apply the pressure and need to make Dennis Allen feel like the seat is getting warm. And instead, all we hear about is how the injuries have happened and how the schedule looks really favorable and how they believe they can win every game coming up. And it just feels like the Saints are kind of living in la-la land right now, instead of addressing the fact that they are unfortunately a team that is on the decline and a team that has looked hopeless the last 2 games, giving up 51 against the Buccaneers in a loss and then getting blown out by the Broncos, who couldn't really move the ball through the passing game. If you take away the passing game, it was run plays and that's it. And that would have got the job done. So my question is for New Orleans, especially upper management, ownership, at what point does that shift happen? Because coming into this season, it should have been a make the playoffs or improve or you're out. And unfortunately, it feels like we're watching a rehash of 2022 and 2023, where the Saints started strong first 2 games, then hit that rough patch, and maybe they'll climb their way back. Maybe the Saints at some point this season will climb their way back to a respectable record. But it feels like at 2-5, the damage is done where you don't make the playoffs and you feel like things are going south. And I just have to understand why. Why? Because I don't get it. I don't get why we continue to grasp onto a head coach who's 26-51. Why we continue to grasp onto a head coach who, after every loss, regurgitates the same speech in the post-game press conference. And why we feel like a coach whose side of the ball is defense and whose side of the ball is letting down this team more than any of us could have expected. What does he offer you? And that is my question. And unfortunately, the Saints, instead of saying, hey, this has to be better, that's got to be better, it's always, well, we improved our tackling. Yeah, after you lost by, 23 to the Broncos. Or, I thought we played really well in this game. We could have won it. Well, you didn't. Or we'll clean this up next week. Dennis Allen, usually after every game, we got to clean this up. We'll get better at that. We thought we had a good week of practice. And then it's an L. And I'm just tired of it. And, I mentioned it on Twitter a couple of days ago. I know that being a GM of a team can't be easy. But at some point, Mickey Loomis has to start giving different answers, because bringing up the injuries just feels like an excuse. And I know you can argue that the injuries are a reason why they're losing, and you would be right. They are a reason why they're losing. The Saints have not earned the benefit of the doubt to use those injuries as the reason why they're losing. Good teams, when they have injuries, you can mention it. And even then, sometimes you can't. Because guess what, guys? The Chiefs have lost Pacheco to an injury. They've lost Hollywood Brown to an injury. They've lost Rashee Rice to an injury. And they just keep plugging away, and they're the only undefeated team left in the season. Vikings, before the season started, lost J.J. McCarthy. Granted, we don't know what he would be. And they're one of the best teams in the NFC. Lions lose Aiden Hutchinson. The very next game, go out there and beat the Vikings, who were previously undefeated. So you can use injuries as an excuse. And I understand there a reason, but it feels like for the Saints, they're using it as an excuse as to why they're losing games instead of addressing the fact that they don't have a good coach. Which brings me, as always, to our tweet of the week, which is presented by Standard Mortgage, your local lender for life. To get in touch with a home loan expert today, you give them a call at 504-569-3902. I asked earlier this week and brought it up. I feel like we're setting up for another year of Dennis Allen. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm convinced that's where we're at. It feels like no pressure is being applied. And again, I have to ask, if they lose again this Sunday and you are 2-6, at what point do you get up to that podium and you as an organization say enough's enough? Enough's enough. We become the joke of the NFL. We just continue to be just crapped on by other teams. When is enough enough? Because right now, the injuries are clouding all the other problems for this team. They can't stop the run. Yes, I know Pete Werner's been hurt, but Pete Werner cannot be the only reason why you can't stop the run. Offense has been atrocious. Understand they're injured, but you can't, into meaningful football have 3 points in a game. That's not going to fly. Calling a timeout before kneeling the football to end the half. What the hell is that? I don't fucking know anymore with this team. So many egregious issues, and yet the coach is on the hot seat, and I feel like that just spikes my blood pressure that we've reached this point. So we'll see what happens with DA, but I truthfully feel like with the way the Saints are talking about this team, they're just going into this year thinking, you know what? Injuries really sunk the boat, and we have to see what DA can do next year. As if his 7th year of coaching is the year that he's going to figure it out. If the guy sucks on the job after 3 years, he's not going to figure it out on the 7th year. I'm just telling you that from now. So we'll see what New Orleans tries to do. But, man, I am not feeling great about where they're heading as an organization because of stupid decisions they make. That said, they made one decision I did like this week, and that's re-signing Alvin Kamara. We'll talk about that, but before we do, I just want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, Scott Fickner.
And Jonathan Williams brings it all the way back from the 20-yard line.
What a terrific way to end the first half.
And tonight's game is brought to you by Scott Fickner Injury Attorneys. They always fight for the win.
You mean attorney? It's one lawyer. Scott Fickner?
No, there's two.
Brad Scott and David Fickner.
Well, it's confusing.
That it is. They could have picked a better name.
Scott Fickner, Injury Attorneys, we fight for the win.
Once again, thank you to Scott Fickner for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. So I mentioned before, Saints did one thing this week that I did agree with, and that is signing Alvin Kamara to an extension. But it does bring up some questions, right? What does this hold for the future of the Saints? I think to some degree, bringing back Alvin means you're not ready for the teardown. And I am okay with that. I am not always a big believer in completely tearing down an organization and getting rid of every single player and starting from zero and saying, you know what, we're going to lose 2 games we're only going to win 2 games this year, 3 games the next year, 3 games the next one, and hope you figure it out with these draft picks. Because you got to hit the draft picks or else you're just a waste of everyone's fucking time. But with Alvin, I think this is a move that I think you can make while still doing those changes in the offseason. Because, look, I know the production's taking a hit with the O-line gotten hurt. But pre-O-line getting hurt, Alvin looked like old Alvin to some degree. He's never going to be what we had in 2017, 2018, 2019. I get that. But I still think Alvin is productive enough that between the leadership aspect and the ability to be a receiver and runner, he'll still bring something to the Saints. I still feel that for the next 2 years. And that's another aspect of it for me that I do like. It is only 2 years. It's not like you're locking him up to some long-term extension, and in 3-4 years from now, we're going to be like, why the hell did they do this? He's still going to be a productive player next year. And if he isn't in 2026, we'll have that conversation when we get there. But he'll be 31, I believe, which, yes, is old for running backs, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, Alvin is not similar to every single running back who has a ton of mileage on them. So I was okay with the contract. You want to argue the salary part, that's fine with me. Now, they were in cap hell regardless. So doing a move like this, I'm okay with. You're fixing your cap for next year a little bit. You're retaining a player who will be productive next year. The one thing, though, that gets me concerned about a deal like this is, do the Saints just plan on running this whole thing back? Because if you listen to Alvin Kamara's press conference, He talked about why he wanted to stay in New Orleans. He mentioned the fans. He mentioned the city. He mentioned his teammates. Not once did he mention ownership. Not once did he mention the coach. And I think that's the biggest thing. The Saints have become a team now. When you ask them what their goal is, who they fight for, it's always each other. It's the players. They don't mention the coach. And I think for Alvin, being the leader he is, he's the type of player you should be approaching when the season's over and getting his true opinion on whether or not they got to bring another guy in the building. And I think Alvin is the type of player that when you are a young coach and you're going into New Orleans, you understand this is not going to be an appealing job, right? Between the cap, older roster, trying to figure things out, it's going to take some time. But Alvin should be a player that would attract coaches there because you know you're going to have that extra leader by your side to kind of keep guys in check. And I do think that part's important. But like I mentioned before, to some degree, I am concerned that this means they're just going to run this whole fucking thing back one more year. And if that happens, I think you're going to completely lose the fans. I thought you would lose the fans this year after they ran it back, but they fought back to 9-8. And some fans, including myself, were like, you know what? We'll give you a clean slate. But when you do it again and you fool us for the third time, you can't fool us for a fourth time. So signing AK, I'm cool with it. Thumbs up. Because truthfully, guys, I don't want to see AK in another uniform. I don't want to see Alvin Kamara play for another team. And you want to say you can't be loyal in football? Cool, fine. 31 years old by the time this contract ends. I'm not sweating it. I am not sweating that contract. But you cannot sell me on another year of DA as a reason for why we're bringing back AK because we just want to run this whole thing back. Because at that point, I would rather you not sign him if that's what it comes with. So that's where I'm kind of at with everything. But man, I am glad because Alvin is the one guy that I know when he steps to the podium, he's going to keep it real. Because we've heard a lot of bullshit from Dennis Allen. We've heard a lot of bullshit from Derek Carr. We occasionally hear a good amount of bullshit from Mickey Loomis. We do not hear bullshit from Alvin Kamara. He is the one dude that is going to keep it real. Fans left early last Thursday. I was at the game. By the third quarter, guys, they were leaving and hitting the exits. Alvin said he doesn't blame them, and he would have left too. I respect it. Instead of telling me that the economy is why fans aren't going to the game, or instead of telling me that, well, you know, we got better at tackling. Really, dude? Who cares about the tackling when you lost by 23 to the fucking Broncos? Like, to me, Alvin keeping it 100 is so important to me. And I do value that. And obviously it helps that he is a damn good player still. So I've been pretty pessimistic and I understand that, but part of me is just aggravated because I think this is the type of week where if you read between the lines, guys, the Saints are setting us up for another year of DA. And that is going to make me physically and mentally ill. But let's talk about some good because I actually think this is a week where the Saints can finally get back in the win column, which we have not seen since mid-September. But this is genuinely, guys, a week where they can pull off the upset. Now, things have to go right, understand that, but let's talk about some reasons why. First one, and it's a big one, Saints are getting healthy. Saints are finally getting healthy. Chris Olave is going to be back this Sunday. Taysom Hill is going to be back this Sunday. Lucas Patrick's going to be back this Sunday. Cesar Ruiz is going to be back this Sunday. And last but not least, Pete Werner will be back this Sunday. So with those guys back, you get your wide receiver one back in the building. You get the secret sauce to the offense, Taysom Hill, because let's be real, Clint Kubiak's system is way better when Taysom Hill's there because he gives you all these, that variety, gives you the mismatches. So Taysom being in is going to help. You get two of your starting offensive linemen back. So that means only McCoy is going to be missing from the week one line. Big loss. Don't get me wrong. McCoy is your best offensive lineman, but 4 out of 5, we'll take it. And then Pete Werner, because we know the run defense has been bad. Now with Pete Werner back, no excuses. You're going to have your front seven healthy and ready to go. So all these guys back, obviously, is going to play a big factor, right? The Saints were trotting out guys that should not be playing in a meaningful football game in October, but they've had to because of injuries and lack of depth. So getting those guys is going to help. Make no mistake about it. It also is going to help with us trying to get an evaluation out of Spencer Rattler because, truthfully, it's almost impossible to get an evaluation out of a young quarterback when they're missing 7 out of 11 offensive starters. And I do think there are some things that Spencer Rattler did that were concerning, right? I think pocket presence isn't great. Holding on to the football too long is not great. But you know what? Now he's got his wide receiver one back. He's got his starting left guard and right guard back. And he's got Taysom Hill back there who should be able to give the Saints some different looks in the run game, as a blocker, even extra pass catcher if they need be. He's going to help out. So Spencer Rattler's life's going to be a little bit easier for him. The run game now with those two starting offensive guards and Taysom Hill back and Alvin feeling a little bit better, I'd say, after that extension, and Kendra Miller should feel good about the run game, at least having options. Whether or not it's going to be successful, you got to play those games. And the one thing about Jim Harbaugh defenses, they love to be tough in the middle. But we play the games. We got to see what happens. Another reason, though, I don't think the Chargers have the playmakers offensively to run away with this one. And even the guys who stepped up Monday night, Ladd McConkey's injured, and Will Dissly, who had a great game against the Cardinals Monday night, he's also injured. So the Chargers are a little banged up right now. The Chargers don't have the juice, I would say, offensively to get it going. This is the 26th ranked team in points and 25th in yards. So if the Saints defense is ever going to have a bounce back game, guys, it has to happen Sunday. And if it doesn't happen Sunday, it probably isn't happening this season. Truthfully speaking, right? Because if you can't get it done against a Charger offense that had 15 points on Monday night, all of that coming from field goals, when the hell are you going to figure it out on defense? So I think the stars are kind of aligning, but I'm also a big believer in rest. I'm a big believer in rest in real life. If you're fucking tired, man, go get some sleep. I promise you, you'll feel better the next day. And in football, when you take a beating, it means the world. And the Saints have had 10 days between this last Thursday's game and this upcoming Sunday's game. And the Chargers, since they played Monday night, are only going to have 6 days between their last game and their next one. And that gap, that 10 versus 6, long week versus short week, you might think it doesn't matter, but earlier this season, Giants played the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football. They lost at home. And then next week played the Seattle Seahawks, who were coming off a Monday night game, a loss to the Detroit Lions. Short week versus a team with extra rest. Giants underdogs on the road, go beat Seattle. Saints now, to extra rest, going up against a team that played on Monday night, coming off a loss, ironically enough, at their home building, although LA is much easier to play than Seattle in terms of fan atmosphere, and you are going to be the underdog. But I think this is a game where the Saints can win. So I don't want to hear the injury cards this week. I don't. Because I think there's plenty of reason to believe the Saints are going to hang in this game. And honestly, guys, I think there's plenty of reason to believe the Saints can win this game. Truthfully. Like, there's plenty of reason to believe it because the Chargers do not have that firepower. But there's one thing that matters, and it matters a lot in this league. The quarterback-coach combo. And Harbaugh and Justin Herbert obviously are going to be way above Dennis Allen and Spencer Rattler in that department. So that could completely tip the scales. But I'm telling you, when you look at this matchup and you look at the fact that the Chargers are not explosive, why can't the Saints hang in this game? And I'll tell you why they can't. And the only reason that would really sink them, if they can't stop the run. If they can't stop J.K. Dobbins, if they can't stop that Greg Roman rushing attack that we all know the Chargers love to lean on, then it will be tough sledding. And that is how you get in one of those games where all of a sudden you're in trouble and you go from 2-0 to now 2-6. But I genuinely believe that the Saints can have success in this game. I mean, the Cardinals just showed it, had some nice running plays. Defensively, for the most part, granted, there were some really egregious fumbles from the Chargers. You know, their defensive tackle gets a pick and then fumbles. Jalen Reagor fumbles right before the goal line. I get that. But you know what? Sloppy teams make sloppy mistakes. I think this is a game the Saints can win. So injuries have been used as an excuse. It better not be used as an excuse this Sunday because you are getting back your run-stuffing linebacker. You are getting back your starting offensive guard. You are getting back your best wide receiver. You are getting back your most versatile offensive weapon. And you had 10 days of rest. 10 days of rest coming off a humiliating loss to your former coach against an offense in the Chargers that, as I mentioned before, 26th in points. So I say it one more time, and I'm not going to say it again. If not now, when are you getting that next win? When are you getting that next win? If you cannot get it now, when everything is going your way outside of Derek Carr playing, and I know that's a big thing, but outside of Derek Carr playing, everything this week has gone the Saints' way. When are you going to get that next win? So Saints, Chargers, I know the Saints are going to be underdogs, but they genuinely should feel pretty good about this game. And I know that sounds crazy because I've been banging on them and they've been god-awful for the last 5 weeks, and they have, and they deserve all the criticism that I've given them. This is a good opportunity for them to go into LA in a lukewarm crowd and go get the win. So it's going to be on them, and we'll see what happens. So I'll get into all your comments, guys, that you have to say. But before I do that, I want to get a quick word from Theo's Pizza.
Scan the code now and tackle your hunger with Theo's Pizza, your neighborhood pizza with 5 convenient locations. Who dat? Your taste buds are about to find out.
Once again, thank you to Theo's Pizza. So we're going to get into our fan Q&A presented by Sunshine, your hometown John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer. Obviously, guys, if you have any comments, put them in the chat and we'll bring them up. Doesn't even have to be related to the Saints-Chargers game, just to be Saints in general, or whatever the hell you guys want, and I'll get to it. We'll start off with Jack. Says, it's sad how the NFC South is probably wide open for the third year in a row, and we are stuck with a moron of a head coach. I think that is another reason why I've been so frustrated with the Dennis Allen situation. Like, you've got him breaks in the schedule. You've got him breaks with the division. The NFC South used to be a freaking gauntlet, man. I go back to 2017. Saints, Panthers, and Falcons. All three of them made the playoffs. I mean, let's go back a couple years ago. Drew Brees' last year. Saints and Bucks were fighting in the divisional round. The NFC South used to be a juggernaut of a division. And now, I'm not going to say it's the worst division in football, because we'll have to see how this year plays out. Bucks and Falcons can still make some noise, and we'll see. Although Bucks are now injured, so maybe that'll kind of, rain out their parade. The NFC South is not what it used to be. So to have these opportunities, and they don't always come around often, but for the Saints, they have for the last 3 years, and to squander them year in, year out, but not take any accountability and not make any changes for it is kind of wild. Jack says, bad run defense versus J.K. Dobbins should be an interesting matchup. It's going to be the one that probably dictates it, right? If the Saints can't slow down the run, then they're going to be in trouble. Now, Cardinals did a great job. J.K. Dobbins only had 40 rushing yards. Even Kamani Vidal only had, I believe, less than 15. So the Saints are they're going to have a chance here. If the run defense is going to make it happen, it is this week. And that's what Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh are going to want to do. They want to play smash mouth football, control the clock. So this is the Saints' opportunity to finally get a little win in the run defense column. And if they don't, good luck. Just Call Me Trey says, I would love to win a game again, but I'm honestly Dennis Allen's our coach, and Carson here. They both will lose when it comes down to it. I just want to retool this team from coaching down. Understood. Like I said, guys, I will never root for the Saints to lose. It just isn't in my blood. But I understand why there's a good portion of Saints fans who are kind of mentally checked out. And even if they were to win this weekend and win against the Panthers, I think they would need to rattle off a good amount of wins in a row for fans to buy back in again. But even then, that loss is going to come, right? The Saints can get back to 5-5, guys. And at some point, whether it's that Rams game, whether it's that Washington game, whether it's that Green Bay game, like the statement game, where if they get that win, you'll be like, oh, now I'll change my opinion of the Saints. It's never going to happen. As long as these guys are around, it's never going to happen. Rachel says, 2-0 to 2-5 is insane. It's so insane, and yet it happened so quick. Boo says, I love Spencer Rattler. I mean, we'll see about Spencer, right? Better opportunity this week, though. More around him, more talent around him. Probably his last start of the year, unless Derek Carr gets hurt again, or if he has a setback in his recovery. So, got to make the most of it. Jerry says, good evening, Chris and Who Dat Nation. Fire, DA, and Mickey. You're not the only one who feels that way, Jerry. You are not the only one who feels that way. And I think that will only ramp up as time goes on. Obviously, with every loss, it gets escalated. But it's not even every loss at this point. It's the way they handle things, right? I can see the Saints going out, beating the Chargers, then beating the god-awful Panthers, and then them having a press conference like, we told you guys, it was the injuries, you got to be patient, and then have a stupid loss later in the year that prevents you from making the playoffs. And then we're all going to be like, okay, well, what happened then? So I just don't trust this organization right now. And I know it sucks to say, and I sound like such a Debbie Downer, and I don't like being negative about the Saints. I fucking hate it. I'd rather go back to week 2 where I'm sitting here talking about how this team could be a contender. That's what I want to do. But it's hard to trust them. They make the same mistakes, and it's happened the last 3 years in a row. Jerry says, we need to end this losing streak. I'm tired of losing games every week. Jerry, I'm tired of it too, man. Their last win was in mid-September. We've gone over a month, I think, since seeing them win. I want to say their win was, I don't even want to say, I don't know the dates. I'd be lying if I said I had the date right. Let me pull it up for you so I can be accurate about this. The Saints' last win came on September 15th. Ugh. Jerry says, glad AK got an extension, so am I, Jerry. Jack says, Alvin's quote last week on never seeing fans clear out of the dome in his entire career should have put fire on DAC. I don't know what will, guys. We've experienced a lot of embarrassing moments already in the DA tenure, right? Detroit Lions fan base taking over last year. Broncos fan base, or whatever was left in the dome, they were the only ones in there at that point in the fourth quarter because the Saints got embarrassed. And to do it on Drew Brees night, Sean Payton on the other side, Sean Payton didn't even do any trickery, right? Like Sean Payton just went with the most vanilla plan and they got a blowout win. Like at some point, the Saints, I don't care if you don't want to throw someone under the bus, got to publicly make it known that this isn't okay. But it feels like they're fine. Like they just want to use that injury card. And I get it, man. Injuries are part of the game. And the Saints would be better if they didn't have these injuries. I understand that. Probably don't lose the Bucs game. Probably win another one here or there. But you know what? Shoulda, coulda, woulda. You're 2-5 now. Jerry says, neither do I. As far as Kamara going to another team, yeah, I wouldn't want to see it, you know? Madden says, let's get top 3 pick. Let's get blown out again. 56-9 Chargers. Let's give up on special ed Dennis Allen. Again, Wolf. 56-9, I don't see it. That would definitely get him fired, though. I'll tell you that much. 56-9 to LA, that would do the trick. Jerry says, glad we're getting our players back. Me too, man. The one thing you don't want in a season like this is to stink, and also you're watching guys that you know aren't relevant to this franchise, right? You want to see your best players out there. That's a no-brainer. But you also want to see players that you know are going to play a factor down the road. Pete Werner, Saints signed an extension. You know he's going to be here for the long haul. Chris Olave, you know he's going to be here for the long haul. Cesar Ruiz, Saints signed him an extension. You know he's going to be here for a while. Taysom Hill, who knows on years, but you know Taysom Hill in the moment is valuable to the team. We've pretty much been watching preseason football the last 2 weeks. So it's nice to get those guys back in there. That's for sure. Madden says fans should scream out, fire DA, fire DA. There was a fire Dennis chant in the Dome in the 620 section. I think 629 it was on Thursday. Wasn't loud enough, but it'll get there. It will get there at some point. I mean, the Saints have at Chargers, at Carolina, and then back home for Cleveland. Hypothetically, if they're 2-7 for that game, it will get ugly. It will. Michael says Saints 45, Chargers 17. Wow. I mean, I don't think that will happen. And I don't think 45-17 Chargers happen either, frankly. Long as Dennis Allen's on this team, will be terrible. I mean, can't argue with it, guys. I'm not going to argue with it. Like, they are who they are. He's 26-51. 26-51 as head coach. So I can't argue with that. And I understand the frustration, especially with basketball season starting now. Like, Saints have to give their fans a reason to stay committed. And we're not getting anything right now. We're just getting a bunch of gibberish. Jack says, off topic, but thoughts on tonight's matchup. Really fun game, right? Vikings first loss. How do they respond coming off that? Rams now getting Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back. Could be Cooper Kupp's last game with the Rams. I think I like Minnesota, at least defensively, to make enough plays down the stretch, win by around a field goal, maybe 4 points. So I'd take Minnesota in this one. I don't feel too great about it because the Rams do have the superior quarterback in this one. But I think this is going to be a really good test for the Vikings, right? Can you make that loss become a lesson and get back in the win column, or do all of a sudden you start to rack up some losses and people maybe start asking questions about how legitimate was the 5-0 start to the season? So really fun matchup here, though. Really, really fun matchup, and I'm excited for this one. Rachel says, can the Saints still make the playoffs? Absolutely. Will they? I'd probably say no, but can they? Yeah, absolutely. Tamika says we were losing with Derek Carr. Yeah, I mean, they're losing Derek Carr, losing with Spencer. No matter who's in right now. To your point, I understand that. If they had Carr in right now, though, it would eliminate excuses. And it sucks, but that's what the Saints are going to do. If the Saints lose on Sunday, they'll get Derek Carr back for the Panthers game. They'll win the Panthers game, and they'll be 2-6, but they'll 3-6. But they'll tell us, well, if we had Carr for these games, I mean, we're 0-3 without Derek Carr. Like, they'll use the excuses. So I understand they have lost games with Derek Carr, both last year and this year. But the reason I bring it up is the Saints are going to look for excuses and any type of paths that they can navigate to make it seem like what happened this year was not their fault. It was things out of their control. When in reality, I understand injuries are out of their control and shit happens. But what they could have controlled was the coaching staff. And they decided to run it back with a coach who's been one of the worst coaches in NFL history, statistically, win percentage, all that. 26-51 is pathetic. So I'm just saying, they will look for excuses. Jack says, don't like the Bucs, but I felt really bad for Chris Godwin. Good guy. I felt terrible for Chris Godwin. Great player, great dude. Entering a contract year to get hurt when the game, you're down 10, you're not winning that fucking game, and your ankle just kind of snaps, and you're out for the season now. And who knows how that affects his stock. It breaks my heart because ankle injuries can be a bitch. I mean, Michael Thomas had that ankle injury and he was never the same again. Not the same one, but an ankle injury of significant magnitude. So I hope Godwin's okay. I also think if I'm Chris Godwin, I'm never playing for Todd Bowles again. Call me petty. I don't care. Call me spiteful. I don't care. You get hurt when you're down 10 with about 45 seconds, 50 seconds left. I'm going to feel some type of way about it. So I felt terrible for Chris Godwin. That absolutely sucked. Marty says we might as well pull out the brown paper bags till DA is gone. Maybe that'll do something, guys. Maybe that'll actually get them to do something, because it seems like the franchise is sleepwalking. They're okay with running the same thing back again, and for a third time, again. Court Star says, at this point, I prepare myself for DA to be your next season. I don't trust this organization. Neither do I, man. Neither do I. And I'm going to be honest with you. We'll see after Sunday, because I think every game matters, wins and losses, how the team operates. But as of right now, I'm assuming that they are going to bring him back for another season. That's my belief. That's me reading the Mickey Loomis comments that he brings up in his radio interviews. They don't sound like a team that really wants to make a change, because deep down that change scares the fuck out of them, because they only know one thing. They know the Sean Payton era, and that's it. Courtstar says, I have J.K. Dobbins in fantasy. I'm guaranteed a lot of points. I have him too. So with my luck, this will be the week that he gets no points, although he didn't do much last week. But yeah, I have J.K. Dobbins too, actually. Funny enough, he is my running back too, with Bijan being my RB1. I got to stop drafting Bijan. But yeah, we'll see if he ends up playing well. Jack says, did you see the Texas fans throwing trash in the field, reverse the bad call versus Georgia? Saints fans should start doing that at bad calls. We missed our opportunity, Jack, though. There was never, ever an opportunity to do it. It would have been that NFC Championship game, man. Tamika says, DA doesn't have enough dog and swag to be head coach. Why should we believe he could pull us out this slump? You can't, Tamika. I mean, I've said this before. Good teams, they earn some leeway. They earn the benefit of the doubt. DA has not earned shit. He has not earned shit, man. And I'm telling you, at this point, there's no reason to believe them. They can win the next two games, guys. Get to 4-5, and I promise you, I still wouldn't believe them. They can get to 5-5, and I still wouldn't believe them. Because at some point, Dennis Allen has to beat actual good football teams, and he doesn't do that. Rose City says, what chance do you give the Saints to win now that some players are back? Are we talking about this weekend? If we're talking about this weekend, 40%, 45%? Look, guys, I like the matchup. I like the fact that LA is only 26th in points scored. I like the fact that the Saints are actually going to be the healthier team going into this game, in my opinion. Getting back Lucas Patrick, Cesar Ruiz, Taysom Hill, Olave, Pete Werner. Chargers are probably going to miss their top tight end target from last week, and also miss Lad McConkey, so that they're going to be a little banged up on offense. I like the 10 days rest. I think stuff like that matters. So I'm going to go 40 to 45% chance of the Saints winning Sunday. Kendall says, we lost games with Carr, but to the offensive credit, they put the defense in position to win 2 games against Philly and Atlanta. Yup. And Kendall, to your point, which is an excellent point, I mentioned when those losses happened, we're all going to talk about how well they played and the feeling in the building's going to be good. Fuck that. There's literally no moral victories in football. There's none. Because had the Saints won those games, they could have survived this stretch. And had the Saints won those 2 games and gotten a 4-0, and even if they lost to the Bucs and they lost to the Broncos and they lost to, who else did the Saints lose at this point? They're losing everyone. I keep losing track of who they've been losing to. Missing one more. Lost to the Chiefs. At 4-3, you would have bought yourself leeway to afford a losing streak. But you know what? You can't. You lost those games. You got to 2-2. And then all of a sudden you were 2-5. So I agree with you. You know, it is different when Carr is in there, and I get that he is the best quarterback on the roster, whether people like it or not. But this team squandered those opportunities, and those are the ones that hurt you the most. Lost to the Broncos when you're depleted? No. Lost to the Buccaneers, as embarrassing as it was? No. It is the losses to the Falcons and Eagles that when you look back at the season, that's when the season turns on its head. Because 2-0 could have became 4-0 instead of 2-2, and then all of a sudden 2-2 became 2-5 in a blink of an eye for this team. So we'll see what happens with the Saints, guys. Again, I do like this matchup for Sunday. I believe the extra rest and the players returning helps the Saints in their favor in a good regard. Now, I still think the Chargers should be favored because they have the better quarterback and the better head coach. But I do like this matchup. And if the Saints do go on to lose, I don't want to hear the injury excuse. I know they don't have Derek Carr, and I know they don't have Eric McCoy, but they're going to get back a guy that's going to help out their run defense. They're going to get back their number 1 receiver. They're going to get back Taysom Hill, who's been kind of the glue guy for their running game. And they're going to get back 2 starting offensive linemen, and they'll have 4 out of 5 ready to go. So I don't want to hear the injuries this Sunday. Go out, Win a goddamn football game. You haven't done it since September 15th. I'm tired of the excuses, and I'm tired of watching this team lose. So we'll see what happens Sunday, guys. Regardless of the result, though, we're going to have our halftime show powered by 4D and also have our post-game live stream. So make sure you guys subscribe to Boot Crew Media's YouTube page and hit the notification bell so you guys don't miss it. And also, Pelican season's back, so get some Pelicans content while you're at it. But that's going to wrap it up, guys, for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I want to thank you so much for leaving all your thoughts and comments. And as always, guys, tune in this Sunday for more from us from the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation. Have a good night, everyone.